El calor del vapor, el olor a pólvora, la intensidad de la batalla.
No.
Howdy folks, and welcome to another presentation on Lost Exile. Yeah, it has been way too long, but we have a lot going on, both off and on the etherwebs. This includes an introductory video to our beautiful city of Arcology, which is a collaboration between yours truly and several other artists. But in this week's lecture, we'll continue the exploits of the Sylvana on the world of Prester, where Alex Rowe is fighting a personal vendetta against the guild. Today we'll learn if the Rowe managed to see this through to the end. But before we reveal the main characters of today's show, let's recap the conclusion of last time. Alex Rowe, the captain of the Sylvana, is on a mission to take down the guild. Once they were responsible for safeguarding humanity's legacy, but instead turned their sky fortress into a frat house with Delphine of House Ayarclair at its head. The Rowe holds her responsible for the death of his wife, Euris, who also happened to be the daughter of Minister Bastianus. When she died, these two men plotted their vengeance on the Maestro, and Bastianus put the Rowe in control of the Ship of Death, the Sylvana. This displeased the Enetrian Emperor, who didn't trust the renegade at all. And he was correct. The Rowe did whatever the hell he pleased, which was once again demonstrated when the Rowe acquired Elvis Hamilton. In short, she's a magical girl capable of controlling the legendary Exile, a mythical machine which is on the fritz, leading to catastrophic climate change, and has caused an ice age on the world of Disif that in turn led to a massive exodus to Enetre, and finally the Battle of Meneges that, well, started everything. In an attempt to take Elvis Hamilton away from the Sylvana, the Emperor sent Vincent Alze after the Rowe. These two commanders fought at the Dragon's Fangs, a fight the Rowe barely managed to win, against all the odds. The Sylvana managed to take out 5 of the best battleships the Untitled Navy had to offer, namely the Urbanus and her 4 sister ships under the command of Vincent. However, Vincent's ability to command his ships is nothing to sneeze at either, and the Rowe only won this clash of the Titans at great expense. Even though this skirmish could be considered a victory, the Sylvana now lay crippled between the jutting rocks of the Dragon's Fangs. The Rowe had won this time, but now both the Disif and the Teray and the Guild were out to get him. Even with Elvis Hamilton in his crew, he still needed to find the Exile within the Grand Stream. He needed additional eyes and ears, but he was all out of allies. Unfortunately, he was a man who excelled at making enemies. Cue Sophia Forrester, his second in command. Those who remember our characters from our last presentation, she is the daughter of Emperor Forrester, the man who ordered the takedown of Alex Rowe. This begs the question, how did the Emperor's only child end up on the Sylvana? Despite being the imperial heiress of Enetre, Sophia did study on the military academy at the same time as Vincent Alze and Alex Rowe. When the Rowe got his command on the Sylvana, the Emperor didn't trust his new captain to execute his orders as intended. And who can blame him? So he ordered the only person he could trust to safeguard the future of the Empire, his daughter Sophia. He may have overestimated his daughter's loyalty though. Sophia took her job as the first officer very seriously and remained loyal to her captain to a fault. Even when the Emperor sent Admiral Alze to capture the Sylvana, she stayed by her captain's side. Her reasons for doing so can only be speculated upon. Nobody questioned Sophia's commitment to her responsibilities, be it as a commander or imperial heiress. Maybe she questioned her father's ability to rule. Perhaps he sought to use the Sylvana to overthrow him from the start. Or maybe it was her relationship with Alex, why she stayed by his side. Without a doubt, his resolute personality gave her a sense of purpose. She would resist the guild and found a way to take it down. Elvis Hamilton and the past race known as the Mysteria were their golden tickets. But without allies, there was little they could do. Sophia must have wondered who was more useful to the cause. Commander Sophie could inspire the crew and support her captain, or Lady Sophia Forrester, who could rally the Anatrine Empire. The decisive factor in her choice came after the Battle of the Dragon's Fangs. While the Sylvana was still undergoing repairs, a vanship returned, bearing grave news from Minagis. Countless Dissiv ships had landed in the deserts of Minagis, but these were no Monitor-class battleships. These were pod-like rockets, overloaded with refugees and supplies. These were launched through the Grand Stream with little regard for safety in one desperate attempt to evacuate as many people as possible from the frozen world of Dissiv, many of which would not survive the journey. When this news reached the Sylvana, it dawned on Sophia this information could change the course of the war. She figured that the Dissiv would agree to a truce in return for land to settle and join them in a fight against the guild, as it was them who caused this calamity to begin with. She figured that her father, with the prospect that the Anatrine would fry in the current climate, would agree to join an alliance against the guild. For the first time in years, Sophia would hang up her uniform and don the imperial regalia once more to perform what she now considered to be her destiny. To unify the people of Dispressor and destroy the guild. She returned to the capital as the Empress heir to convince her father to cease hostilities with the Dissiv. And when she spoke to her father in the throne room, the Emperor did not listen to her pleas. In his eyes, the Dissiv were dishonorable dogs, and not only that, there was simply no way to feed both people with the available land. He saw only one possible outcome to the current conflict, and that was for the Dissiv to be exterminated along with the guild. But for that, he needed Elvis Hamilton. Therefore, he had his own daughter arrested for treason and locked her in a tower to await further prosecution. A absurd turn of events, but all of this was far from over, and things were about to escalate quickly. But before we move on, I would like to thank the supporters of our institute, Bowler Hat Tom and Steamy Wonders. If you are stuck at home like many people, check out the other audiobooks on our channel, and it would be greatly appreciated if you spread the word. And with that, let's continue our presentation. With Sophia being stuck in the tower, things seemed pretty desperate. But she wasn't the only person in trouble. The Dissiv refugees and their navy were still stuck at Minagis. Admiral Alzey had managed to keep them there, but after his defeat at the Dragon's Fangs, he was demoted, and there was a shift in the command structure of the navy. As a result of this, and due to an astounding lack of foresight and gross incompetence, the Anatrine Navy left the Imperial capital open to attack. They left the defense of the capital to a single Urbanus-class battleship commanded by some mouth-breather who replaced Vincent Alzey. Within moments, countless Monitor-class airships bombarded the capital, and the Dissiv musketeers stormed out of their battleships amidst the flames. The Anatrine garrison offered fierce, be it unorganized resistance, but finally they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemy musketeers, who had nothing to lose. During the attack, the Emperor and his First Minister Bastianus apparently died in each other's arms, for some reason, which was really weird. But hey, I'm not judging. Amidst the chaos, Sophia was still locked inside the tower awaiting prosecution. According to the history, it was Vincent Elze himself that got her out and finally brought her to the Urbanus, now under the control of mutineers, who disposed of the idiot put in control by the now very dead Emperor. This left Princess Sophia the new regent of the Empire.
And there was much rejoicing.
The loss of the capital was a severe blow. But remember, if the Emperor had listened to his daughter, this could have prevented everything. She understood the Diziv were desperate, and there was no point in crying over spilled milk. Her first course of action was to rally what remained of the Anatolian navy behind her and reinstate Admiral Elze. The second would be to contact the Diziv commander. It wasn't much of a challenge to convince the Diziv to accept an alliance. They were running out of water to keep their people alive and their ships in the air, not to mention all the other problems that come along with running an exodus. With the alliance signed, it was time to rally the people. This would be done at Sophia's coronation, which would be attended by officials and officers from both nations as a sign of cooperation. Ships of both fleets would oversee the ritual, as band ships provided the much-needed visual effects to give it more swagger. The Savannah was also in attendance, be it from a greater distance, as both fleets suffered humiliation at the hands of its captain. However, they didn't invite one other certain group, a faction that didn't enjoy being left out, especially when somebody else was the center of attention. Just when the Empress was crowned, rose petals started to trickle down on the attendees of the coronation. When the Roe heard the report of rose petals descending from the heavens, the usual calm and collected captain threw a fucking fit. He jumped from his chair and ordered the crew to ready the guns, because he knew who was about to arrive. A massive red starship descended from the clouds. Delphine Heraclaire had finally revealed herself, and her message couldn't be more obvious.
This world's mine, it belongs to me. So I can go wherever I wish, whenever I wish.
The plebs below were about to unite against the Maestro, and she would heed their challenge head on. While the Allied fleets were paralyzed by this display of dominance, the Roe was preparing to engage the monstrous ship in a moment of vengeance-filled fury, but his officers managed to stop him from making a grave mistake. And thus the Maestro left, unopposed, leaving all those in attendance in awe of the guild's superiority and arrogance. This is probably a good moment to talk about Maestro Delphine Heraclaire, the grade A sociopath who rules the guild. Delphine Heraclaire is the leader of the guild and daughter of Darius Heraclaire. Darius took control over the guild away from James Hamilton. After 600 years, the guild was in decline, and its mission had become something of an afterthought. Darius gained renown during his period when he rediscovered Exile. Yeah, that's right. The guild was so backward they forgot about their colony ship. When it was time for the aging James to step down, the Council of Principals were to elect a member of the new generation to succeed him. Bastiana's daughter, Eurus, was one of the candidates. But Darius used his knowledge of Exile as a crowbar to have his 13-year-old daughter Delphine to be the Maestro's successor. And he succeeded. House Heraclae's future seemed secured. But then Elvis Hamilton was born. Heraclaire might know where Exile is, but the Hamiltons could still control it. This was the start of a bloody political purge. The teenage Delphine Heraclaire preached the doctrine of Genios, which dictated the guild was superior in all aspects to the terrestrial nations and started to consolidate her power throughout the guild. Those who didn't flee were killed, including her father Darius himself. Those who remained were presumably brainwashed. Any guild member who reached the ripe old age of 17 had to undergo a coming-of-age ritual called the Trail of Agun. The details about this ritual are unknown, beyond it breaking the minds of those subjected to it, turning them into servants, mostly uncritical of their maestro's behavior. After her house took control, Delphine restructured the guild to be loyal to her, and her alone. She believed humanity was not worthy of their protection and should only exist to fulfill her own hedonism. It was also believed she could bring people back from the dead. Again, not really clarified. She just does. Possibly so she can have her warriors engage in blood sports for entertainment. And considering the guild consists out of transhumans, it must be quite a display. This maestro is all about access and self-glorification. She has dedicated vital areas of the botanical gardens just to tend to her roses. She sends hunters out to fetch the finest foods at great personal risk. All is to fuel her narcissism and yet manage to justify her behavior for the sake of the greater good.
This world is too small to support more than a handful of you dirt crawlers. Understand? If your kind were allowed to eat and drink whatever you like, you would multiply like rabbits and soon be extinct. Which is why only myself and a privileged few are allowed the pleasure of enjoying the finer things of this world.
From their perspective, the guild was untouchable. Their fortress resided in the Grand Stream. Their ships were the size of cities. Their fighters were comprised of what could be considered archaeotech, far beyond that of the rest of humanity who barely managed wireless radios. But if these dirt crawlers managed to control Exile, the guild would crumble. For the first time, Delphine felt she needed to intervene in human affairs. The first order of business was to acquire Elvis Hamilton. For that, she needed to board to Sylvana. So they did. Easily. Somehow. Either Delphine never took the Sylvana seriously up to this point, or they finally sent their A-team to deal with it. I mean, what do you want from me? All this happened off screen. They even managed to capture the Roe himself after he had the maestro at knife point. But despite being a badass, still remained human, who was no match for her transhuman bodyguards. But in her arrogance, she led the Sylvana and her crew as it was. A big mistake. All these events finally came to a head in what I will call the Battle for Exile. I apologize if it all sounds rushed, but the records get kind of confusing. After the capture of Alex Rowe, Sophia returned to the Sylvana to take control. Together with the Urbanus, they explored the Grand Stream in order to locate Exile, using sound-receiving torpedoes to listen in to the Exile's engine. They finally found the legendary vessel, all the way up in the atmosphere of Disif. Meanwhile, a guild fleet approached the metropolis-sized Exile. But Exile wasn't some corroding wreck. Its systems were wide awake and always watching. The moment the guild approached, a number of their ships were immediately destroyed by its defensive systems, consisting of an array of tentacle-like blades able to literally cut ships to pieces. Inside her flagship, the maestro drugged and tortured the Roe in order to get him to recite the passphrases she needed to control Exile. The four Mysteria. Even the Roe was no match for Truth Serum. Unfortunately for Delphine, he only knew 3 of them. Regardless, it was enough. When Elvis Hamilton heard the first passphrase, she could reach out to Exile, whose AI decided to tolerate their presence. For the time being, at least. But wait, you say? Didn't the Row already have the full Mysteria? Well, he kinda did. He just didn't know them all personally. The fourth one was only known to somebody he knew he could trust to recite it when the moment came. That being no other than Sophia Forrester, who was his trump card all along. Now Delphine had no choice but to fight the Allied fleet head-on to acquire the last piece of the poem. This shouldn't be a problem. The only reason the distant monitor ships and Enterprise claimed Solus class remained in the air was because of the Guild Claudia units inside each of these ships. Self-sustaining units directly controlled by the Guild, and they could eject at any time they pleased, leaving their host ships to sink with all hands. However, the Allies were well aware they could not resist the Guild as long their ships were not self-sustaining. So they prepared a near-suicidal scheme. Out of sight of Guild monitors, they retrained all available musketeers to execute new tactics. Close quarters combat. For weeks, they trained volunteers for a single suicidal operation to charge each and every Guild unit inside their navies. As soon as the Urbanus and Sylvana located the Exile, a fleet-wide signal was given. On every Alliance ship, Dissiv and Enterprise musketeers stormed the Guild units, broke the gates open, and charged in with little regard for their own safety. In an all-or-nothing gambit, the Allies secured most ships within the combined fleet at the expense of several vessels which would plunge from the sky. But it was the price they had to pay in order to continue the fight. In an act of spite, the Guild dropped a piece of its own sky fortress on Enterprise. The humongous spike had such an impact, it caused a shockwave that devastated many cities like Nokia, and all the Allies could do was watch it happen. But with their fleet secured and inspired by this atrocity, it was time for them to take the fight to the Guild and make the bastards pay for what they had done. Unfortunately, the Guild starships were far superior. The Alliance ships were made for a very ritualized form of warfare. In other words, the Guild had both a technological and tactical advantage. But the Alliance didn't just retrain their musketeers. Remember Commander Matt Fane, the commander at the Battle of Menagis? A vanship that enabled his fleet to get away inspired him to reform the Eritrean Navy tactics significantly. In a preparation for war with the Guild, battleships were refitted to carry vanship squadrons, and our navy recruited every available vanship pilot they could find and trained them for the upcoming battle. Pilots were instructed to fly in formation at mock targets, using vessels passed over by the Guild refugees. They learned about the internal layout of the starships, so every pilot would know where to strike. But would all that effort pay off? The moment of truth finally arrived. When the Allied fleet was about to enter the Grand Stream, dozens of starships emerged from the anomaly. In a single volley, these things managed to blow a significant part of the Allied formation out of existence, while Allied artillery proved ineffective. That is when Matt Fane gave the order for his new squadrons to attack. Hundreds of vanships stormed the enemy like an army of angry flying monkeys facing the enemy flag. They would enter the starships through various breaches in their hulls and started wreaking havoc on the interior structure itself, throwing bombs and launching torpedoes at critical junctions. After a short but intense engagement, the starships were falling from the sky while burning out from the inside. It was an astounding victory, all things considered, but the battle had just begun. Now the Allies needed to traverse the Grand Stream. Fortunately, thanks to Dissiv intel, they now possessed knowledge of safe passages from the storm. Relatively speaking. The Dissiv learned about these roads by following the flight patterns of migrating birds. Yeah, they have birds moving from one planet to another. Be it as it may, they now had to contend with Exile's defensive tentacles. These made short work of any Alliance vessel that came too close, just like it did those of the Guild. The Alliance had only one way to neutralize Exile: Elvis Hamilton. When your strategy hinges on the weaponization of a little girl, you know you have a problem. Especially if that little girl is captured by the Guild. However, amidst all the fighting, a number of events had transpired. First, Elvis Hamilton managed to escape from the Guild flagship, thanks to the help of Guild rebels. It is rumored that it was Delphine's own brother who helped her escape, but this is all rather blurry. Apparently a Vanship pilot then finally returned her to the Sylvana. With Elvis safely secured, the dwindling Alliance forces prepared for a last-ditch attempt to penetrate Exile's defenses and sink Maestro Delphine's flagship. The Sylvana charged the Maestro's flagship as the remaining Alliance forces shot a path through Exile's tentacles. The Urbanus top deck got torn off in the process and finally crashed inside of Exile itself. But eventually, they managed to land Elvis on the surface of Exile, and then she used her magical girl powers to get access to the interior of the ship, enabling her to take control over its defenses. But what about the Row? Well, just before the flagship was taken down, the Row managed to free one of his hands from his shackles and choke the living daylight out of Delphine Heraclaire in a last act of defiance, fulfilling the last item on his bucket list. And with the Delphine dead and Exile in the control of the Alliance, the war finally came to an end. As Elvis activated the Exile, the Grand Stream that once separated the kingdoms ceased to exist. The weather turned milder, but its effects on the climate remained to linger. But now, Exile could finally fulfill its supposed purpose as a colony ship and started ferrying people back to Earth. Sophia Forrester became the Empress of the Kingdom of Dissiv and Terray and would lead the Exodus. Her people would be the last exiles who would unite with all the other remnants of humanity on Earth after their centuries-long diaspora across the stars. And with that we end our series on Lost Exile. Let us know your thoughts on the lore. If there are other retro-futuristic series you'd like us to cover, please let us know in the comments. Yeah, I realize this is a pretty short outro after a 3-part series, but I have little more to say other than, stay safe. We recently published a pilot of our own original series, The Association of Ishtar, on our main channel. Future episodes will probably air on this channel. However, we also opened a SoundCloud account so we can post the audio-only versions of this video and our other narrations there. Link will be in the description. If you want to help out, you can start by liking, commenting and sharing our content. But above all, thank you all so much for watching this to the end.